private military company Wagner Group has been making the headlines for all the wrong reasons since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. More recently, the Moscow Group is being linked with many African countries to the horror of the West. These countries are mostly those who have insurgent problems on their hands. The mercenaries are believed to be in countries like Central African Republic, Libya, Mozambique, and Mali. Reports say their services are usually paid in kind with natural resources like gold and diamond mines. And now they are in Burkina Faso too. Well, allegedly. Ghanaian President Nana Addo Akufo-Addo disclosed this in a meeting with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken that he was particularly distressed by the presence of the Wagner Group on Ghana's border with Burkina Faso. He went on to say that the mercenaries were being rewarded with a mine close to Ghana's northern border. Meanwhile, authorities in Burkina Faso are displeased by Ghana's president's comments. Although they are yet to address the allegations directly, confirm or deny them, so far, the Foreign Affairs Ministry has met with Ghana's ambassador to discuss Akufo-Addo's position. Burkina Faso authorities said he could have used more diplomatic channels. They have since recalled the Burkina Faso ambassador stationed in Accra as the country further consults on the latest development. Now, this diplomatic mess may not be between the West African neighbors only. France has waded in, and to a large extent, Russia is roped in because of its alleged links with the Wagner Group. And that's why we're gathered at the square today. My name is Keminni Amanor, and you're welcome to the square. Also joining us today are Adib Saani, his security analyst and executive director at the Center for Human Security and Peace Building. He's joining us from Accra, Ghana. We also have Dr. Daniel Kere, his lecturer and researcher in law and political science at the Thomas Sankara University in Burkina Faso. Gentlemen, you're welcome to the square.
Thank you. Thank you, Keminni.
Great. I'll start off with you, Dr. Kere. Talk to us about the reactions that Burkina Faso like yourself have had since this disclosure by the Ghanaian president.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. In Burkina Faso here, many persons are surprised by this opinion of Ghanaian presidents, given that it is internal problems. Burkina problems is for Burkina Faso with 2 points. It is not proper for Ghanaian people, for Ghanaian president to talk about our internal affairs. So I think that it is not we don't have a good perception with this allegation. And we have to tell it to Ghanaian president. The Ghanaian ambassador here has been convened for a discussion in the Foreign Affairs Department. They expressed the disappointment regarding to Ghanaian president point of view. In the past, we have suffered many times for terrorism. They don't mobilize strongly to help us. Now we are trying to find solutions, even if it is with Russia or other partners, and we find.
Well, I think we lost Dr. Kere there, and so I'll move on to Adib. Adib, you share a similar position as Dr. Kere there. You wrote about the presidents of Ghana's comments in the U.S., where you said he had no business talking about Burkina Faso. Speak to us about that.
Well, Keminni, I think it is important to establish a certain fact. Whatever a sovereign country can do to protect its existence, there is no immorality to that. So even if a country has to use nukes to protect its very existence, it will be obliged to do so. Burkina Faso is a sovereign country. And currently, as we speak, 60% of that country is in the hands of the terrorists. The French came in, they rather made matters worse. The Burkinabes have used different means to help curb the spate of terrorism in that country to no avail. So if Burkina Faso, just as any other country, can go into partnership with any group, so far as it doesn't pose an existential threat to any country, it has to do so, and nobody has any right to complain. Ghana has gone into defense cooperation agreements with the UK, with the US, and Burkina Faso didn't complain. Nigeria didn't. Togo didn't. Ivory Coast didn't. So Ghana has no moral right, and I speak as a Ghanaian, but most importantly, as someone who stands for the truth, I think the president's statements were reckless and so undiplomatic, and I would have expected that he, being a former foreign affairs minister, would know the implications of certain things you say. If you had any reason to be concerned about what Wagner is doing, which, by the way, Wagner doesn't pose any threat, either directly or indirectly, to Ghana. They haven't said they would invade Ghana or engage in cross-border, incursions into Ghana. Nothing of that nature. But even if, let's say, what the president is saying is anything to go by, what do you expect? I would have expected that the president speaks to fellow West Africans, calls for an ECOWAS summit to look into it, because he is a staunch supporter of African problems requiring African solutions. Has he reported to ECOWAS? No. Has he reported to AU? No. Why all the way to Washington, D.C., not even to President Biden, but to the Foreign Affairs Minister of the United States? I find it very disappointed. It is very demeaning, and the Burkinabes have every right to take every diplomatic, action against us.
They have indeed taken action. One of the things that they have done is to recall their ambassador in Ghana. But I want us to look at the issue raised itself, beyond the channel that Akufo-Addo used, which you have condemned. The issue being that Ghana is concerned that the Wagner Group is in Burkina Faso. You try to square that to the fact that Ghana has also had US and UK military on ground. But I believe the difference here would be the fact that no one outside of our jurisdiction is concerned about the US or the UK. However, there's a lot of concerns that have been raised about Russia and the Wagner Group on the continent. Wouldn't that fly?
Well, I would have expected consistency, because there was a lot of concern about the operations of the French in Ivory Coast, in Mali, and of course in Burkina Faso. On countless occasions, according to reports, the French had to even go into negotiation with the terrorists so they are able to get certain safety guarantees. There are some parts of Mali, when the military attempts going through that territory, they are attacked. But when the French attempt, nobody is attacked. We could have expressed similar sentiments, but we've been very inconsistent on this occasion. And Keminni, this brings into perspective the issue of mercenaries and all that. You see, almost every major geopolitical player has a mercenary group they work with. Okay, the Egyptians have their mercenaries who are working or fighting alongside Colonel Haftar against the UN-backed administration in Tripoli. The Turkish have their mercenaries who they used in the Nagorno-Karabakh war, and of course, fighting alongside the Free Syrian Army against President Bashar al-Assad. The Emiratis, the Saudi Arabians have mercenaries who are fighting against the Houthis in Yemen. The Americans, you remember Blackwater and what they did in Iraq? Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch have cited them for gross human rights violation, including the killing of children at a square in Baghdad. Nobody has been held to account. Okay?
How I follow up with that, Adib. Why do you think that the West is quite alarmed by the activities of Wagner in Africa?
So this is this is a very intelligent, timely question. There's a scramble for Africa. Remember Russia-Africa summit? Then we had the China-Africa summit. Then from nowhere, the US goes like, no way, we need our chunk, we need our share of the goodies in Africa. They also came out with the US-Africa summit. The US has promised to invest about $50 billion in Africa. The Chinese have already invested about $200 billion in Africa. So there's a mad rush, okay? And for a lot of countries, especially within sub-Saharan Africa, they're beginning to look to the east rather than the west, okay, to get out of their economic quagmires, of their economic situation, and even security-wise, okay. For some time, the countries within the Sahel have had to rely on the French. But they realized at the point the French are not helping. They are rather making matters worse. Operation Takuba, Operation Barkhane didn't help in stemming the tide of terrorism within that area. So they are looking the other way. Okay, the Russian mercenary group, Wagner, who are present in Central African Republic, they are present in Sudan, Egypt, and some, other parts of the continent that has not been disclosed. Okay. And like I indicated, Russia wants its share, America wants its share. So America is thinking, and of course Europe, they are thinking that, hey, the Russians are filling the vacuum, so it's important we act. Because once they are able to come in and give the people security guarantees, then they will learn to stick with them. And that would be a major problem for a lot of Western countries who have, for years on end, have had to rely on Africa for their mineral resources.
Which is why I'd like you to speak to how Africa should be positioning itself right now. When we look at the Wagner case, what we hear is the fact that this group allegedly is being paid with natural resources. And as you know, disclosed by the Ghanaian president, in the case of Burkina Faso, they are being paid with a mine that borders on the north of Ghana. Now, how do we make sure that, despite all that you have said, this does not turn into an exploitative relationship?
Keminni, the relationship between Africa and, for instance, the West has always been exploitative. The French rely heavily on the Sahel for uranium because they mine it there. In the past, after the Second World War, they used that area to test their nuclear, bombs. Okay. The Americans have also had to rely on a lot of countries, especially within sub-Saharan Africa, for their mineral resources. And by the way, for a lot of former French colonies, they still pay, certain dues. Their gold reserves is in Paris. Okay, so there seems to be an international geopolitical chess game. And the only way out for Africa is for us to reason up. It's for us to adopt a non-aligned, neutral position in dealing with these, East-West thing. Since the end of the Second World War, it has always been like that, especially taking ahead during the Cold War until the collapse of the USSR. But we still have these divisions very pronounced at the UN level, at the trade and commerce level, international politics, etc. So we need to be very unbiased. We need to be very neutral. And we also have to, as a matter of necessity, place a lot of priority on our interests. These people have no friends, they have interests. So we have to learn to hold in high esteem our interests. For example,
Adib, I'll have you hold to that thought just for a tad. Dr. Daniel Kere has joined us again. Doc, you're welcome back to the conversation. If you just joined us, Dr. Kere is lecturer and researcher in law and political science at the Thomas Sankara University in Burkina Faso. So, Doc, we were talking about your country. I'd like to know if the people of Burkina Faso, to the best of your knowledge as the public, are you aware of the activities of Wagner Group in your country?
We have suffered a lot of more of terrorism. So at this time, all of our our need is to overcome this terrorism, even if it is with Wagner Group or it is with French or Americans. You see, the main problem that we don't understand is that Western countries, there are choosing, they would like to choose.
Dr. Kere, I apologize. The connection is so terrible. The connection is so terrible. We are unable to hear you. So we will try and fix that connection. It seems you can't even hear me, but we'll bring Dr. Kere back. I apologize for the horrible connection. We'll come back to Adib. Adib, here's what we're going to do. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we will continue the conversation, particularly on the Burkina Faso issue. Stay with us.
News Central TV, Africa's #1 storyteller, has come with the best of both worlds. With a combination of news app and live TV, we ensure that you keep track of the latest headlines, breaking news, and in-depth analysis from professional journalists from around the continent. Download the News Central TV app on Android and iOS and get started today. Don't forget to follow us on News Central's social media platforms. News Central, Africa First.
Thanks for staying with us here on Village Square Africa. We're discussing the activities of Wagner Group here on the continent. Still with me is Adib Saani. He's a security analyst and executive director at the Center for Human Security and Peace Building. He's joining us from Accra, Ghana. Adib, thank you so much for your patience. Now, I want us to look at France's involvement in all of this. After the president of Ghana made the comments, a day after that, France weighs into the conversation and says Burkina Faso is very much aware of the risks involved in working with Wagner Group. From the diplomatic point of view, what do you think about France's actions?
Well, I mean, I'm not surprised because they were within the fray of things. They were very much, at the forefront of the fight against terrorism in Burkina Faso. Unfortunately, not much. The militants were still able to effectively stage attacks, particularly against Burkinabe military personnel, and that is what culminated into the coup against former President Christian Kabore. Unfortunately, the Miba came, he wasn't also able to handle the situation. Then we had Captain Traore coming to take over. And according to the new junta, they felt that the Miba was very much uncomfortably close to the French, and they saw him more like a French pawn rather than representing the interest of Burkina Faso. So I remember clearly, the videos I saw from downtown Ouagadougou when the latest coup was successful, people holding Russian flags and calling for a relook at their relationship with the French. And so for me, who has closely been monitoring the situation on the ground, it is not surprising that the Burkinabes have decided to follow the steps of Mali, rethink their strategic relationship with the French, who have largely been very selfish to a very large extent. I mean, so far as helping the Sahelian countries counter terrorism is concerned. So why not come out clear? So they think that the Russians would come out clear. Okay, this is why we're here. This is what help we can give you. And in return, we want this or that. And that's exactly what is happening. And it's getting the French worried because the Russians have successfully filled the vacuum.
Right. We'll talk about that success in a moment, but Dr. Kere has just joined us again. Dr. Daniel Kere is lecturer and researcher at the Thomas Sankara University in Burkina Faso. Doc, now talk to us about, you mentioned that, Ghana's actions, are very appalling as far as diplomatic relations are concerned. But really, what would you have expected Ghana to do, given that from where Adib and I come from, we have a proverb that says that when your neighbor's beard is on fire, you find yourself a bucket of water. And so what should Ghana have done if they felt threatened by that? Dr. Kere, can you hear me? I do not believe we have Dr. Kere over the phone, so would focus on Adib. And Adib, if you could take that question for me just quickly before we go on to the group itself.
Okay, so I was expecting that as a big brother as Ghana is, within the West African sub-region and even beyond, we would have expressed our sentiments with the sub-regional bloc and probably the AU. Unfortunately, none of that was done. Nobody was spoken with. And I'm even wondering whether indeed we spoke with the Burkinabe authorities. But that notwithstanding, we don't have any right whatsoever to express such sentiments in the first place, so far as it doesn't directly or indirectly.
Isn't it also telling that when Burkinabe authorities decided to release a statement after the meeting with Ghana's ambassador with Burkina Faso, they could not speak directly to the allegation whether or not these mercenaries were in their country?
It is a national security issue, and Burkina Faso is not obliged to report to Ghana. Okay, just as Ghana is not obliged to report to Burkina Faso, just that has decided to report to the US. Okay, we have no right whatsoever. The thing is, I am even thinking that it is in Ghana's strategic interest to have Wagner there, because the fight that is happening against the terrorists is to Ghana's benefits. So if today the Burkinabe authorities decide that, okay, if this is how you pay us back, we're going to let loose the borders, that would be a cataclysmic security nightmare to Ghanaian security officials.
Are we talking about the same Wagner group that is accused of human rights abuses, the same Wagner group that is accused of recruiting African prisoners into the war and drafting them into the war in Russia? Are we talking about the same Wagner group that allegedly is exploiting the continent of its resources to fund the war in Ukraine? Is this the same group we are talking about working with?
Well, the thing is, this would be tantamount to the pot calling the kettle black or vice versa. When you are in a war situation, I'm not a spokesperson for Wagner, so it is not in my place to speak on behalf, but I speak as a researcher who has done a lot of work on the mercenaries, their modes of operations over the years in Africa, outside Africa. When you are in a war situation, these things happen. The US carry out drone strikes, sometimes resulting in collateral damage, in which women and children get killed. What happened? The last drone strike in Kabul, in Afghanistan, was an innocent man, carrying water, and there were children all over. They were all killed. But it doesn't mean that the US is a terrorist state, okay? These groups, of course, sometimes engage in, gross human rights violations that we cannot run away from. But if you need their services to counter a bigger threat, which is the militant situation, the jihadist situation in Burkina Faso, I think it is in their place to do it. Unless what help did we offer them? Okay, if we had offered them help that proved efficacious, that proved helpful, that would have been a different story altogether. But this is the case. Burkina Faso is fighting for survival. Currently, like I indicated, 60% of the country is in the hands of these jihadists. The country is a desperate country. It needs help. And wherever it can get that help, it has to go for it. It has no option to think of it. But
now,
what has happened is very dangerous for our relationship, because we shared a lot of intelligence in the past. Okay, because they are doing the fighting. We are only doing the fighting remotely, but they are with the militants. They are engaged in the firefights. So they will understand them more than we do. And so we rely to a very large extent on the intelligence they give us. But now that we have made it clear that we report to the Americans, they will be very cautious with the kind of intelligence they give us.
We'll talk a bit more about the consequences for both countries in a moment. Daniel Kere has joined us again. Doc, are you over the phone now? I do not believe so. So, Adib, now, before we go into the consequences, you talked about the fact that Russia has successfully done what France and other countries in the West couldn't do. Now, how successful has Wagner been against jihadist extremists in Burkina Faso and indeed other countries where they are?
Well, we are yet to get the full facts of the matter, but I do know that in Mali it has been relatively successful as compared to the French mission there. The situation is deteriorated in Burkina Faso. Things are so bad that currently it's not, sorry.
Well, I think we lost Adib there for a bit, but you're watching Village Square Africa. Today we have been talking about the activities of Wagner Group in many parts of the continent, but particularly our interest today is in Burkina Faso, where the disclosure from the president of Ghana appears to be causing a diplomatic mess. Adib is back over the Zoom connection. Adib, talk to us. You were saying something.
Yes, so it is very difficult at this time to evaluate to what extent they've been successful, okay? But what I do know from my sources on the ground is they've been able to push the militants back to some extent. Even though lately we've had some marriages of inconvenience, or let me say marriages of convenience rather, between the various groups, the Jenim associated groups, what do you call it, Islamic State in the, sorry, in the Maghreb, etc., which have strengthened their resolve. That notwithstanding, I can also see, to a very large extent, a great deal of resolve on the part of the Burkinabes with the help of Wagner Group. So for now, Keminni, it is almost impossible to tell, but surely progress seems to be made better than when the French was there.
Well,
I'm sorry, I have a little cough. Sorry about that.
Well, thank you for sustaining yourself in spite of that problem. I want to talk about what appears to be the four-way diplomatic route that we are faced with. Ghana, Burkina Faso, France, and then for some reason, because of Wagner's alleged links with the Russian government, Russia is also waded into this diplomatic mess. Talk to us on the impact on these West African countries, Ghana and Burkina Faso.
Okay, so it goes without saying that trust and confidence between Ghana and Burkina Faso is broken. In the past, we cooperated at different levels, especially through the Accra Initiative. About a month ago, non-state actors were brought together from all across West Africa to the Accra International Conference Center. I was part of it. I even proposed the establishment of a multinational joint task force, a standby force of some sort, which has duly been captured into the document. That proposal was made by me. Then, after us, the ministers came, went through the discussions that, I mean, the proposals we made when we had the discussions the previous week. After the ministers, then the heads of states came, then adopted. And it included a number of different approaches to be adopted. And I must say, Burkina Faso was a very important player within the scheme of things. So now that that trust has been broken, we are bound to face resistance and less collaboration or cooperation so far as implementing the Accra Initiative is concerned. Two, like I indicated earlier, they'll be very careful the kind of intelligence they give us, knowing full well that we might just pass it over to the Americans. And that would pose a bit of a problem for us in Ghana so far as planning towards preventing, especially, the inflow of terrorists into the country. And by the way, various national security documents have indicated that some of these individuals have been spotted in, certain parts of our northern frontier. Okay. Then we could also have issues with the Malians who inspired the Burkinabes to go for the Russians because they have tried and tested them and it's worked for them. Okay, so they would also be careful. Above all, we would also have issues with the Russians. I know they are not happy about it, so I was not surprised when they even published statements I had made with respect to this issue.
So here's my thing. I also see the connection between Ghana and Russia and how this could impact the diplomatic relations with Russia, especially when Ghana on one hand had said that really I want to abstain from this matter, Russia-Ukraine, but on the other hand did what the president did. But going forward,
and Keminni, sorry to cut you, Keminni, this is not the first time. This is not the first time we seem to be stepping on Russian toes. Okay, not too long ago, we blamed the economic situation in Ghana on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And Russian embassy published, look, you cannot blame what is happening on food prices because food was just flying high astronomically.
And we said, at the risk of entering into an economical conversation right now, I'd have us use the last few minutes we have to discuss how you expect these countries, particularly the West African neighbors, to go around this so this mess does not degenerate. What should we be doing? What should be the lessons we're drawing from this?
Okay, so first of all, I'm a student of international politics, and we always say that diplomacy is the art of telling someone to go to hell in a very nice way, and the person would ask for the direction to hell. I think this is a monumental diplomatic gaffe, and the only way out is through diplomacy. I would have expected that the Ghana government dispatched a high-powered delegation to Burkina Faso to reaffirm their support towards countering the threat of terrorism in that country. And of course, reassure them of Ghana's, support going forward. And to let them understand that what they heard might not necessarily be what it appears to be, but it's just an effort to get international attention to what is going on in that country. The Ghana's national security minister is very experienced. He's worked with other countries within the West African sub-region, and he has a lot of respect. And I'm hoping that he would bring his expertise to bear in getting the various parties to understand that this shouldn't, lead to anything that will be inimical to our fight against terrorism. Above all, I think most importantly, Ghana's president needs to apologize unconditionally to the government of Burkina Faso so we can let sleeping dogs lie and move and forge ahead as a people with a common threat.
Indeed.
Because we always say that the terrorism is a global issue that requires global effort. You know, you cannot fight it alone. And Ghana cannot fight terrorism without Burkina Faso.
And vice versa, isn't it?
Absolutely. There's no denying that fact. Collaboration is extremely key going forward.
We'll see how the two nations and by extension the four nations deal with this going forward. I'm absolutely grateful for your time here, Adib.
My pleasure always, Keminni.
Indeed. Adib Saani is a security analyst and executive director at the Center for Human Security and Peace Building in Accra. He joined us as we discuss the activities of Wagner Group on the back of certain disclosures that the president of Ghana, Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo, made sometime last week in the U.S. Earlier, there was Dr. Daniel Kere, whose connection, I must apologize for, was very horrible. We couldn't have the conversation with him. But he also joined us from the Thomas Sankara University in Burkina Faso. I hope you learned a thing or two. Tomorrow, we'll have another conversation about another West African country that is facing economic turmoil at this point in his life. You want to stay with us for that conversation. So let me see you again tomorrow here on Village Square Africa. My name is Keminni Amanor. Bye-bye.